Our next speaker is Swami Sarvapriyananda, and his talk is The Real and the Appearance, Gita chapter 2, verse 16.
Thank you so much, Mataji. I was reminded of an experience I had about 20 years ago when Swami Atmarupanji told us about the beautiful lesson that Swami Nityaswarupanji gave. It is not important what you do, but it is what you are becoming by what you do. I remember I was a brahmachari, a novice, in the main temple of Sri Ramakrishna in Belur Math in India. So those who have seen the temple, you know that behind it there's a small room where a lot of preparation for the worship goes on. One of the things that I had to do when I was serving there was to polish the flower vases. There are brass flower vases. So one day in the afternoon, I was sitting there and polishing it. A monk entered the temple from that little gate at the back. And he saw me and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Why, Swami, I'm polishing the flower vases." And he said, "No, you're polishing your mind." So there's a beautiful thing I never forgot, and it's exactly what Swami Nityaswarupanji is trying to tell us there. So the last session, I violated time discipline. I said I would make it a short talk, like a TED talk, but I didn't. I got carried away. But this time I will restrict myself, and so that we have a time for question answer. What did we see last time? It can actually be put in like, axioms. We saw that all our life is experiences. What's an experience? Experience is consciousness plus object. What are we? We are consciousness. What is the nature of this consciousness? Well, first, it is eternal, unchanging. Second, it is real, and whatever appears to consciousness is just that appearance. Third, consciousness is not an object. If it's something that you know, hear, smell, taste, touch, feel, think about, understand, don't understand, it's an object. It's not consciousness. Fourth is that consciousness is one. There aren't many consciousnesses, and it's the only thing. It pervades everything that we experience, one and all pervasive. And finally, as a consequence of all of this, is that this consciousness, the only reality, which you are, is not a doer of actions, is not an experiencer of the results of actions. See how beautifully it ties with what Swami Atmarupanji was just saying. The nature of liberation is that you're liberated from being a doer and an experiencer. Karta bhokta. This consciousness, this reality, it's not a doer or an experiencer. To understand these aspects of consciousness, use the dream example, use the movie example. They'll all work. Use the gold and ornaments example, wave and waters example, clay and pots example. All right. In this session, I will narrow in, zoom in on the second aspect of consciousness, which I mentioned. Consciousness is real. Everything else is an appearance. By everything else, I mean, what else is there apart from consciousness? The objects of consciousness. Remember, our life is experiences. Experiences are consciousness plus objects. So the objects which seem so real, this world out there, all these people, my body, even my thoughts and feelings, all of this is an appearance. This is nothing more than what the famous line which is used to sum up and describe Advaita Vedanta. Very famous. Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. Jiva Brahmaiva Napara. Brahman is the only reality. World is an appearance. And you are nothing other than, the sentient being is none other than Brahman. Or in our language, consciousness is the only reality. Objects are appearances. And you are that consciousness. All right. Krishna gives this teaching in the 16th verse of the Bhagavad Gita. It's so important, philosophically speaking. There are many key verses in the Bhagavad Gita, but philosophically speaking, this is so important. One monk in Uttarakhand in the Himalayas said, ye to Gita ki hriday hai. This is the heart of the Bhagavad Gita, but heart in the sense, the philosophical heart. What does this verse say? This verse says, Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satah, ubhayorapi drishtantah, tvanayo tattvadarshibhihi. The unreal has no existence, and the real has no non-existence. This conclusion about these two has been seen by the knowers of truth. In our language, consciousness never has non-existence. It always is. And whatever appears to consciousness has no independent existence apart from consciousness. It's not like the way it feels, a world out there apart from me. No. Using Buddhist terms, all that appears to consciousness has no existence from their own side. Just by the way, somebody who's trained in Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, might say, so, but are you not saying consciousness has its existence from its own side? You are denying the existence of objects of consciousness. But are you not claiming, you Vedantin, claiming that consciousness exists from its own side? Very careful here. Vedanta does not claim that consciousness exists from its own side. What exists? What do you think exists from their own side? Things which exist. Consciousness is not a thing which exists. Consciousness is existence itself, being itself, isn't itself. And that's what we'll try to understand. It sounds very abstract, but it's not very difficult to understand. That's the topic we'll talk about. And then we will dive into the interaction, the question answer. So, there are things, the world around us is composed of impermanent things, anitya. Things are born, they seem to exist for some time, and then they disappear. Things are born and they die. Things are created and they are destroyed. This is called impermanent. All is impermanent. Some exist for middle range, months, years. Some exist for tiny fractions of time, microseconds, or even tinier fractions of time, particles. Some exist for millions of years, maybe billions of years. But they all have a beginning and an end. This is impermanent. And this is something we don't doubt. We know just about everything that we experience is impermanent. All objects are impermanent. But impermanent does not mean falsity. I want to draw the difference between impermanence and falsity here, and then go on to show how impermanent things are actually false. I'm trying to draw a distinction between anitya on one side and mithya, to use the Sanskrit terms. Anitya, impermanent. Mithya, false. Let's use the classic example in Vedanta, the snake rope. A real snake, that means a snake which is there in the zoo or in the garden, is anitya, is impermanent, correct. There's a time when it was born, and there's a time when that snake will die. But in between, that snake does exist. If you have any doubts, if you confront it, it's going to hiss and chase you around, and if you're not careful, it'll bite you. It'll leave you in no doubt that it exists, at least for that time being. That's what we call impermanent. Did not exist earlier, will not exist at some point in the future. But right now it does exist. That person right now is alive. That object right now does exist. We don't say they are false. We don't say they are magic shows or dreams or illusions. Whereas the snake in the rope, which we saw by mistake, did not exist earlier, will not exist in the future, but right now also does not exist, only seems to exist. We are making a mistake. We are seeing the rope as a snake. Is this difference understood? This difference between the impermanent, which is a fact of life, not at all difficult to grasp, and the false, illusory, dream, mistake, error, mithya, anitya and mithya. Normally, we don't say they are the same thing. But now, Vedanta is claiming, Krishna is claiming, Shankara is claiming, all the things which are impermanent are actually mithya, false. How so? This is what we are going to understand now. For this, I want to bring in the concept of a borrowed existence. What's a borrowed existence? a thing which borrows its apparent existence from something else, a deeper reality. Like, for example, borrowing money. Um, a lot of it in this country, people borrow a lot of money and buy things with that money. Nowhere more so than where I'm living in Manhattan. So people move in next door to you. They seem very rich. They have cool gadgets and cars and fancy clothes. And then next year they're gone. The house has been, the apartment is gone, and the car has been repossessed and things like that. All that happens. Why? Because they really didn't own that, all of that. It was all on credit. It was all borrowed. So borrowed wealth has this characteristic of coming and going. It comes to you, but even when it is yours, all the things that you own with that borrowed wealth are not really yours. Let me give you a simpler example. So I'm boiling a potato. It's a hot potato. Because it's hot, it's boiling. Now, does the heat belong to the potato? Is a potato intrinsically hot by its very nature? No. It was cold earlier. Now it's very hot. But soon, when you set it on the plate and serve it, very soon it will become cold. Because, why so? Because it's borrowed the heat. Its heat does not belong to it. It's borrowed it. From where? From the boiling water in which the potato was immersed. Is the water intrinsically hot? No, it's not intrinsically hot. It was cool earlier, and very soon it will cool down again. So why? Because the heat does not belong to the water intrinsically. Where does the heat come from? Where has the water borrowed the heat? It's borrowed it from the hot pan on which I was boiling the potato. Is the pan intrinsically hot? No. The pan was cool earlier. It's hot now. It's soon going to be cool when you turn up the gas or the electricity. So the fire is turned up, the pan will become cool. It is also borrowed its heat from the fire. The fire underneath, is it intrinsically hot? Yes. Because as long the fire is there, as long as it is a fire, it's going to be hot. I mean, you take it in a very non-philosophical, common sense way. So we know that's a source of heat. It's hot in itself, and it can lend heat to other things. Now look at the difference between the borrowed heat and the intrinsic heat. The borrowed heat comes and goes as long as the source of heat is there. And the source of heat, interestingly, can be the intrinsic heat of the fire, or it can be some other borrowed heat. See, for example, somebody can borrow money, and then other people can borrow money from that borrower. You can lend it out to another person, that person can lend it out to another person, but they are all borrowed it, and the debts can be called in at one time. Similarly, the intrinsic heat of the fire doesn't go out. As long as the fire is there, intrinsic heat is there. But everything else, you notice a curious characteristic of the heat of the pan and the water and the potato. They are all impermanent. They are all coming and going. They're subject to increase and decrease. They're subject to coming and going, appearance and disappearance. So this appearance and disappearance points to borrowed property, not an intrinsic property. All right. Now you might say, of course, that's all right. A fire also can be put out. Fire can be lit and fire can be put out and so on. But now let me ask you, not just the heat of fire, not just the sweetness of sugar, for example, but suppose the property is not heat, but the property is something like existence. Property is existence. Now, I'll go into this, but just a little sidebar here. Those who are trained in philosophy, especially analytic philosophy, they'll immediately object because existence is not supposed to be a property. This was the great discovery of Bertrand Russell. But anyway, we're setting it aside for the time being, for our analysis right now. Suppose existence is a borrowed property, what will happen? And suppose existence is an intrinsic property, what will happen? If existed, any borrowed property comes and goes. If existence is a borrowed property, then it will come and go. Existence, if any entity has borrowed existence, then that existence of that entity will come and go. Existence come and go is a fancy way of saying that entity will be created and destroyed. It's a fancy way of saying that entity will be born and die. That's, existence coming means what? Birth, creation, coming into existence. It's just like coming into money. So coming into existence, and disappearance of existence means what? Death, the destruction of that entity, the death of that entity. The very fact that anything is born and then it dies, that it is created and it is destroyed, that very fact shows existence is borrowed. That entity has borrowed its existence. This thing you notice everywhere. All the entities that we know, living, non-living, everything, small, huge, whatever we see in this universe, all objects have this property of, have this characteristic of coming into existence and dying, being born and dying, being created and being destroyed, which implies they have borrowed existence. They have borrowed existence. They don't have intrinsic existence. But like the potato and the water and the pan, they all borrowed heat from the fire. Where have all these things borrowed their existence from? They must have ultimately borrowed it from something which has intrinsic existence. But what has intrinsic existence? Look back to what Krishna, the first thing which Krishna said about consciousness, about awareness, Atman. He said the Atman is not born, it does not die. He said it is eternal, Nitya, it is Shashvata, again another word for eternal, Purana, ancient and yet ever new. It is Avinashi, cannot be destroyed by weapons, cannot be cut by a sword, pierced by an arrow, it cannot be drowned by water, it cannot be dried out by air, it cannot be burnt by fire. All of this, he's just making one statement. The existence of your existence of Atman, of consciousness, is intrinsic existence. Why? How do you know that? Because it's not born, it does not die. Being born means borrowing existence. Dying means losing that borrowed existence. But if it's not born and it does not die, then it does not borrow existence, it does not lose existence, because it has existence of its own. It does not have borrowed existence. Okay. So what? In Vedanta, this is crucial, in Advaita Vedanta, borrowed existence is called falsity. Borrowed existence is called falsity. Mithya. Mithya means falsity. The world is false, Brahman is real. It means the world has a borrowed existence. Where has it borrowed it from? The only one which has natural intrinsic existence, which is Brahman. So whatever appears in the world, whatever you see, all of that has borrowed existence from Brahman, from the underlying reality. In our language, what we were discussing in the first session, awareness, consciousness, because it is continuous, because it is not coming and going, it is not born, not dying, not created, not destroyed, therefore it has intrinsic existence. And the objects of consciousness, which are constantly popping in and out of existence, whatever you experience, born and dying, coming and going, created and destroyed, therefore they do not have intrinsic existence. All the objects of consciousness borrow their existence from consciousness. The reality is consciousness because it is eternal and it does not have a borrowed existence, it has an intrinsic existence. And all the objects of consciousness, whatever you experience in life, those are borrowed existence. Consciousness is real, objects are appearances. In Sanskrit, consciousness satyam, objects mithya. See, the objects are impermanent, nobody doubts. But the objects are false, appearance. This we don't, normally we don't accept it. So this is where impermanence, transience, the transitory nature of things, you derive falsity from that. The world is an appearance. How does that help? In two ways, two very important ways. The world is an appearance where? In consciousness. So what is it to me? You are consciousness. The world that you experience, all the people in it, all the troubles in it, including your own body and mind, is an appearance in you, the consciousness. Now, what is the consequence of that? Twofold. See, why falsity, the teaching of world falsity, which disturbs many people. What use does it, what practical use does it have? I mean, it's a fact from an Advaitic perspective, so the truth has to be told. But practically, in our spiritual life, what use does it have? Two very powerful uses, very, very powerful. The world attracts us and scares us because we take it to be real. The world tempts us and terrifies us because we take it to be a fact. Notice that a cookie, I like a cookie, it's in front of me, I want to eat it. But if you ask me, imagine a cookie and then try to eat that imagined cookie. No, I won't. I can imagine a cookie very well, but I know it's only in my mind. It's not a real cookie out there, and therefore I feel no attraction for it. All the wonderful things that I saw in my dream, the moment I wake up and realize, oh, all that, all those fancy gadgets and stuff I saw in the dream, I woke up, oh, I have no more attraction left for them. Why? Because I realized they were false. They were not real. They don't exist. Nothing that you see on a movie screen ultimately really tempts you or terrifies you. If you see King Kong on a movie screen, you don't run out of the hall. You enjoy and clap wonderful special effects. Let alone King Kong. If a little monkey comes into the movie hall, it'll empty the hall. People will run screaming out of the hall. You don't want to be in the dark in a movie hall with a monkey in there, real little monkey. So how come the little monkey scares you and the huge King Kong doesn't? The only difference is both of them you experience. You hear it, you see it. But the difference is this one is not real. The King Kong is not real. The monkey, little monkey, is you feel it's real. Therefore, it scares you. World can tempt us. The world can terrify us because it's invested with reality. The moment you suck that reality out of the world, it can neither tempt us nor terrify us. It'll just become a movie. It'll become a dream. Swami Vivekananda says, things are dead in themselves. We breathe life into them. Then we run after them or we run away from them. Everything. Dead means not physically dead. It means real or unreal. That difference. We breathe reality into it. We breathe reality is a way of saying you, the consciousness, invest things in the world with existence. Just like everything in your dream feels real, as long as you don't know it's a dream. Who gave reality, so-called reality, to the things in your dream? You did. Where did those things in the dream, which scare you, tempt you, annoy you, and cause anxiety, all of that, where did they get their reality? Where did they get their power? From you, the dreamer. So the first big implication for our spiritual life is we are freed from terror and temptation, raga, dvesha, likes and dislikes, the moment we realize the falsity of all appearance, the falsity of objects. First use. It helps you tremendously in spiritual life. It sets you free from being entangled. Consciousness gets entangled in its own objects, thinking it to be real or feeling it to be real. That's first. Even deeper use, and this is tremendous. A monk said that it's only the beginners in Vedanta who think the teaching about world falsity is meant to inculcate dispassion. Monks are supposed to be dispassionate about the world. How do you become dispassionate? You consider the world to be false, an appearance. That's a Vedantic way. And this monk said, this teacher said, it's only beginners in Vedanta, he said in Hindi, Kache Vedanti, unripe Vedantists, who think that the teaching about the falsity of the world is to make you dispassionate about it, so you don't get attached to the world. No, there's a deeper meaning to it. The teaching about the falsity of the world is meant to show you where the reality lies. Where is the real rope? You're seeing a snake. Somebody tells you it's not a snake, it's a rope. Where is the real rope then? There itself, where you are seeing the snake. You are in a dream world. Somebody comes and tells you it's a dream. Wake up. So where is the waker? Here itself. What appears to be the dream world? Here itself. Where is Brahman? Where is God? Where is Atman? Where is pure consciousness? Here itself. Where would this world you are experiencing? Right here, right now. This is it. This is it. So, pots and pans? No, not quite. That's the amazing thing about it. So the deeper meaning, the use of the falsity of the world, the teaching of the falsity of the world is to directly point out the reality. It is the reality alone which is appearing as this false world because it's deriving its reality from there. I just add a little bit drawing from the commentary on Shankara by Shankaracharya. He gives a long commentary on this verse. You can see that he'll be delighted with this verse because this really establishes teaching of Gita as a non-dual teaching. So he gives a long commentary on that. He says, the ultimate reality is existence itself. Not that the things exist. All things borrow their existence from existence itself. What is meant by existence itself? Nothing other than the intrinsic property or the intrinsic characteristic of consciousness. Pure consciousness is called chit in Sanskrit or Chaitanya. The fact that it has intrinsic existence, it is existence, its existence is never lost, never gained, it never goes away. This intrinsic existence of consciousness is called Sat, pure being. So consciousness is Sat Chit in Sanskrit. Now Shankaracharya says that is the ultimate reality. Where do you see this existence? In all existing things. The pot is, the cloth is, in Sanskrit, ghata asti, pata asti. So that existence is real, but the names and forms are not real. So existence cannot be destroyed. It's because it's intrinsic. How? If you smash the pot, then the existence is gone. He says, no, pot is gone. The pot form is gone and you cannot use the name pot. But the broken potsherds so you still feel that existence there. Then if you pound it to powder, powder is, if you destroy all the pots in the universe and destroy all the clay also, then where is your existence? The cloth is, now you see where he's going. He makes a very deep point. Oh, the cloth is, okay, I'll settle this once for all. Suppose every existing thing in the universe is destroyed. Every existing thing in the universe is destroyed. Then where is your precious existence? Doesn't existence need an existing thing? Quite the other way around. Existing things need existence. Existence does not need existing things. What happens is, suppose everything in the universe is destroyed. And does that ever happen? It does happen. At the end of a cosmic cycle, when the universe goes away. So that is Vedantic cosmology. No thing is there. Where is existence? Existence still continues, but there is no way of appreciating it. There's no way of experiencing it, and no person to experience it also. Being is still there. You consider it the other way around from the consciousness perspective. Suppose all objects of consciousness are erased. Suppose all objects are erased. Will consciousness go away? No. But then you will not feel that it will not be tangible. Let's put it this way. What does consciousness do for its objects? It illumines them, reveals them. What do the objects do for consciousness? It manifests that consciousness. For example, right now, between me and this camera, there is light, but you can't see it between me and the camera. So there's no object to reflect that light between me and the camera. Suppose I thrust my hand here. You see? Can you see the light shining brightly from my hand? We remove the hand. There's the space here. The space is not shining. It requires an object to manifest the already existing light. Take the object away. Where is that shining? Gone. It requires objects to manifest consciousness. You get the feeling of being aware, of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, all the conscious activities of the mind and the senses. That goes away when the objects are taken away. That goes away when all the existing entities disappear, suppose. But the existence itself, consciousness itself, does not disappear. That is the reality, and all the objects are appearances. Existence is the reality, and all existing things have borrowed existence. Consciousness is the reality, and all the objects to consciousness have borrowed existence. This borrowed existence is falsity. They have no real existence of their own. They don't exist from their own side. Consciousness is real. Objects are appearance. Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithya. Hey, where am I in all of this? Where is my place? You are that reality. You are consciousness itself. All right. Now let's take questions. You'll have to
Swami,
unmute. Yes.
yes, yes. Who is realizing with self-realization? What is the instrument of realization?
Who is realizing and what is the instrument? Okay, good question. Your pure consciousness. Does pure consciousness, Brahman, the absolute, have to realize that I am Brahman, I am the absolute? No, not necessary. Because Brahman is Brahman, does not need it. Who is realizing? It is none other than Brahman itself, but under the delusion that I am this limited body and mind, what we call a sentient being. So the sentient being is the one who is looking for illumination, who will become illumined and realize that I have been Brahman all along. This is a paradoxical way of putting it. If you say, who is the one who is realizing? Shankaracharya does something funny with this. Somebody asks him this question in one of the commentaries. So I am Brahman. So then who is looking for enlightenment? I'm an absolute reality. I'm fine and enlightened. I'm ever the absolute. So who is looking for enlightenment? Or the question was even more precise. Who is in ignorance? You can't say Brahman is in ignorance. It's like saying the sun is in darkness. Who is in ignorance? And Shankaracharya's answer to that is also remarkable. He says, why are you asking? Then this opponent who's asking the question says, I'm asking because I don't know. Aha, you don't know. You just said it. You don't know means you are in ignorance. Don't know means ignorance. He says, but I am Brahman. You just told me. Do you know that? If you know that, there's no problem. If you don't know that, come to class, Vedanta retreat. One of the Swamis, I think it was Ashokanandaji or Asheshanandaji, one of them, he said it so beautifully. He said, on this side of enlightenment, on our side, we have the question, but no answer to these questions. And on their side of enlightenment, the enlightened ones, they have the answer, but they don't have the question anymore.
Swami, if the Atman is actionless, what determines the actions and speech of the Jnani?
Who is the Jnani? Is he pure consciousness, Atman? Yes, just as we all are. But also, for the time being, because of the past karma which produced the body, that particular body in which that being got enlightenment. And that continues. Past karma is there. That will continue as long as the body continues. And the mind, which has come through many lives and finally been perfected and gained illumination, that mind also has its own conditioning. So the body mind will determine the actions of the Jnani. Remember, it's a very purified mind. Sri Ramakrishna used to say the expert dancer does not miss a step. So the Jnani has become, the enlightened one has become an expert dancer over one lifetime, maybe many lifetimes of practice of the other yogas of meditation and devotion and selflessness. So that will determine the activities of the Jnani. It will be very natural, very spontaneous.
Swami, how do we operate or switch between pure Advaita, the universe is false and an appearance, and continuing life as a Jivatma with prayers, meditation, karma yoga, etc.?
You don't have to switch. Remember, pure Advaita, that I am Brahman and the whole universe is an appearance, that's the background. Hold on to that. Sri Ramakrishna said, whatever you do, Sri Ramakrishna himself says that. He uses a Bengali term, Advaita Gyan Achole Bedhe Jaichyatai Kar. Achole Bedhe means in India, in small towns, in rural like villages, women would have the keys to the house, everything tied to the hem of their sari. They would tie it to the hem of the sari. So all the essential stuff is tied to the hem of the sari. That allows them to unlock everything in the household. Similarly, Sri Ramakrishna says, tie this knowledge of Advaita to the hem of your cloth, your sari or whatever it is. And then he says, do whatever you like. By doing whatever you like means you can practice meditation, you can practice selfless service, you can be devotional. All the activities of your life can perfectly go on and it's perfectly compatible with the Vedantic framework. In fact, that's the only way it is compatible. You see, if Vedanta is at all true, Advaita Vedanta, then at this moment, you must be Brahman. Right now, you must be Brahman. That must be true right now. And you are Brahman, but you hold a job, you're raising a family, you are happy, you are unhappy, you fight with people, you come to Vedanta class, all activities are happily going on. Only difference that will happen is the moment you realize that you are Brahman, then you're no longer trapped. You realize it's a movie. If you don't realize it's a movie, then you are a character in a movie and you're sort of trapped in the, you're locked into the plot of the movie. The moment you realize the character continues, the movie continues, but you are free of it. You realize you're the screen on which the movie is playing. Let the little person, this individual, do what the individual is supposed to do. Let it go on. It will go on much better. Let me give you the story from Yoga Vashishta. There's a beautiful story. There's the queen, Churala, and she was enlightened. And the king, after some time, he asked his wife that, my dear, you are, doing all the queenly things, the first lady things, but you're so calm and so relaxed and serene. How do you manage to be so serene in the midst of such tumult? And then she says, well, there is this, I have a secret. I can teach it to you if you like. And then she teaches him the story about the teaching about the Atman, exactly what Krishna taught Arjuna. You are not the body, not the mind. You're this witness consciousness. There is perfection there. You are ever undisturbed. Your body and mind, they have their problems, but as consciousness, you have no beginning, no end. Weapons cannot destroy you. The ups and downs of the mind do not affect you. And she taught him the meditation also, how to become absorbed in samadhi in the real self. He was delighted. He said, let me go and cultivate this. He takes a sabbatical and goes off into the forest. I'm sure he has another palace in the forest where he's meditating. And he tells the queen to take care of the kingdom. So he does that. And he very soon realizes, becomes illumined, and is absorbed in samadhi most of the days. It becomes saintly. And then one day he has this doubt, and he comes back to the capital and asks his wife, my dear, I have another question. You have realized this, what you taught me. This is so incredible. This is so fantastic. I don't want to come out of it anymore. Like Narendranath, Vivekananda, who when he first experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi and Sri Ramakrishna asked him, what do you want now? He says, I just want to remain in that and once in a while come down and maybe have a snack and go back into it. There's nothing that compares with it. Sri Ramakrishna, of course, scolded him, but the queen didn't scold her husband. The queen said, the husband asked, you know this, it's so incredible, and yet you don't want to remain absorbed there. You are carrying out the activities of the world, running a kingdom and all this trouble. Why do you do that? You could easily withdraw from all of it and remain absorbed. The queen said, I was waiting for you to ask this question. There is another level to this teaching. And not only the great secret, but the ultimate secret is that from which you withdrew the world and the body and the mind into the reality, which is pure consciousness. Excellent. But that from which you withdrew is also that pure consciousness. You see, the world appears to you, in you is nothing other than you. That Sri Ramakrishna said, is God there only when I close my eyes? Is God not there when I open my eyes? What kind of God would that be? Which depends on only closing my eyes. That which you experience everywhere is the same God. Therefore, you can be in the midst of all activities and yet be having unbroken, continuous communion with God. I'm using God language, but existence, consciousness, bliss. With eyes closed, eyes open.
Okay. It is said no mind state is said to be enlightenment. I have heard you saying that the samadhi experience is for the mind. These seem contradictory. Can you please explain?
Good. This question follows nicely from the earlier one. I forgot to answer the second part of that question. What is the instrument of enlightenment? So what is the instrument of enlightenment? The mind itself is the instrument of enlightenment, but exactly how, I will not go into this here. The Vedanta Sara series of talks, if you see, they're all online now. Towards the end, this question is raised. Do you need the mind for enlightenment or do you not? Can the mind realize Brahman or can it not? And the answer is yes and no. And how, what role, why is the mind necessary? And what is it that the mind cannot do in enlightenment? That is clearly explained. The two technical terms I will give you now, but I will not explain. The role of the mind and what it can do and cannot do. Vritti vyapti, phala vyapti. Vritti vyapti, phala vyapti. How does the mind know anything in the world? And how is knowing or realizing your real nature, Brahman, different from knowing things in the world? So that is the context. I will not go into it now. It's Vedantic epistemology. You have to explain how things are known by consciousness. How does consciousness use a mind and senses and a body to know things in the world? And how, when consciousness itself becomes the quest that to know yourself, what the mind can do, to what extent can it go, what is its limit, and what lies beyond. Vritti vyapti, phala vyapti. You want to answer to this mystery? Vedanta Sara, and towards the end of the whole series.
Swami, isn't love pure consciousness too, expressing through different mediums?
Yes, love is that pure consciousness, is the best expression of that pure consciousness. Why is that so? Because pure consciousness is also oneness. Pure being, pure consciousness is the same thing, and it's oneness. We're in the midst of a thunderstorm now. Consciousness is expressing itself as a hail, like a storm outside now. So pure consciousness is expressed as love, because love is also oneness. And love, the ultimate result or the culmination of love is oneness. But that is love, which is pretty impersonal. That love is not limited to I love this person and nobody else. That may be a beginning, but that's not the end of love. The end of love is the same love. Some lady was saying that how incredible it is that so much love I feel for my kid, but how incredible it would be to have the same kind of love for everybody in the universe, all beings, not only human beings, all living creatures also. You love it as your own child. And that was the love that the Holy Mother had for all of us. That's the love that God has for all of us. I remember once in Belur Mutt, I was walking towards the temple of the Holy Mother, Ma Sharda, and I was thinking this question. So we are worshipping God, we are worshipping God, and we love God, we have faith in God, we are thinking about God, trying to understand God. But what does God think about us? That was a question that came to my mind. And of course, because I was going to the temple of the Holy Mother, Ma Sharda, immediately the answer came. God thinks of us as her children. We are all the children of God. God has a relationship to us with what a mother has to her children.
Swami, if consciousness is the only truth and the world is false, then how does the cycle of karma work, which is individualistic for every individual? How are they connected?
Doesn't work. That's the interesting thing. Shankaracharya in his commentaries, he takes up one of the fundamental teachings of Hinduism, not Hinduism, just all the Indian religions, Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, all of them strongly hold on to the law of karma. So what about the law of karma? If Brahman is the reality, all the world is an appearance, what about the law of karma? And Shankaracharya says, appearance. It's all part of the movie. Crime and punishment. So somebody does something and is punished for it in the movie. How is the screen affected by that? Not at all. Yet, remember, all of this is made possible because of the screen. You can't have the movie without the screen. But the movie does not affect the screen. Whatever you do in the movie will not affect the screen. The biggest of explosions will not start a fire in the screen. The greatest of floods and thunderstorms in the movie will not wet even a corner, even a tiny part of the screen. What happens at one level of truth does not affect the deeper level of truth. But the deeper level of truth makes this level of truth possible. I'm translating from the philosophical terms. Paramatica satyam, vyavaharika satyam. Paramatica, absolute truth, Brahman. Or in Buddhist terms, the suchness of things. That makes this relative world, Vyavaharika Satyam, possible. But this relative world has no, backlash, no effect back on pure consciousness or the reality.
Swami, this question is connected to that one. Since our true nature is consciousness and everything else, the gross, subtle, causal bodies, etc., are within consciousness and have a dependent existence, they are not real. Since karma is also something within Maya, is it safe to say that karma is also unreal?
Right. Exactly what I said earlier. Let me quote Swami Vivekananda. How real karma is, how inexorable. Like Swami Nitya Swarupananda said, it's scary in a way that whatever you're doing is transforming you. Not important what you're doing, but what you're becoming by what you're doing. Whether you're doing karma yoga or you're doing naughty things, it's transforming you. Swami Vivekananda says, good, good, bad, bad, and none escape the law. Whosoever wears a form wears the chain too. So this is the inexorable nature of karma. Then what is Vedanta? What can Vedanta do to us? He says, but far beyond name and form is Atman ever free. Know thou art that, sannyasi bold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. You cannot escape the script set out by the director of the movie. But in only one sense you can, if you are the screen on which the movie is playing.
Swami, practically in everyday life, is it recommended to frequently remind myself that the world is unreal?
It's a very good thing to tell yourself. One good practice practice means short practice. Don't do it more than maybe a couple of times a day, just for seconds. Otherwise the result will be certified insanity. Short practice, it's like flushing the mind. Sit calmly, relaxed, look around the room, wherever you are, and tell yourself, whatever I see is meaningless. Whatever. What really scares us, hurts us, upsets us is the kind of meaning we have invested in these things. Say it's all meaningless. Whatever I hear, don't do it to me now, but just for a second. Whatever I'm hearing, anything, good, bad, praise, insults, meaningless. It's like the chatter of birds, meaningless, literally meaningless, devoid of meaning. Whatever I touch, smell, taste, meaningless. Then close your eyes, turn your attention inwards. Thoughts, memories, feelings, emotions, good and bad, noble and miserable, meaningless. Flush it all out. There's no worth, no value whatsoever. Do it a couple of times a day, you will see how much freedom you will get. You will breathe a shuddering breath of relief and release. But twice a day, not more than that. You can see how it will damage your life if you stick to that. Yeah. Yes, once in a while, remind yourself that of the appearance nature of this world. Good, I'm free. And you'll be happy in this world. Free as a bird, let the world come, let it stay, let it go. Let happiness come, let it stay, let it go. Let the so-called misery and depression come, let it stay, let it go. I won't go so far as to say enjoy your depression, but the depression certainly will become less and lighter, less burdensome if you have this attitude.
Swami, there's just one last question. You have 1 minute to answer it. Can you get liberation without bhakti?
Yes and no. You can get liberation by the path of knowledge, as Swami Vivekananda said, by any one of these paths. But are you really without bhakti? Shankaracharya says, the extraordinary desire to realize who I am, that is bhakti. So he redefines bhakti. If you have an extraordinary quest that I want to realize I am Brahman, that is a kind of bhakti also.
Wonderful.